Bob and I are together, Scott.
Yep.
So we just put the phone on the table. And
Yeah.
Did he tell you that he what? Sorry.
I'm glad that he called me and he reassured me, which is.
Okay, we are live on YouTube, just so you know.
I'll call your mom.
Okay,
Yeah, finish
somebody needs to mute
your
their,
I'll call her to tell her to sleep
phone.
over and blah, 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 blah. But listen, did he tell you that he wants you to go back in a month?
That's
so
Jay.
Can you mute,
chest
please?
X-ray?
Jay.
No, he didn't.
Okay, so he said.
Okay, there we go. That's Roberta. Okay, so we are ready to go?
Are all set.
We're recording and we're on YouTube. Okay, great. So I'll call to order the special meeting of the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners and the Board of Selectmen on January 21st, 2021. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, this meeting of the Dudley Board of Water Sewer Commissioners and the Board of Selectmen will be conducted in total or in part via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website or at town's website, dudleyma.gov. If you would like to attend this meeting, please contact Jennifer Canoyer at 508-949-8007 or watersewer@dudleyma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: via YouTube and/or the posted link at www.dudleyma.gov. With that, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I do have a flag right over my shoulder, so I guess we can use that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
Which stands one nation,
God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Okay, this meeting was called to discuss the Dudley Water System's drinking water PFAS 6 public education notice that was mailed out last week. There was considerable activity as concerns this on the town's website, by telephone, and on social media. So we called together a group of experts that we have been in regular conversation with over the past many months, about a year or so, that we have been dealing with the finding of PFAS in our water system. I have Mary Jude Pigsley and Marielle Stone from MassDEP, Department of Environmental Protection. And I have Jeff Faulkner and James Collins from Ty and Bond, our engineering firm. And then we have Jay Billings, who is our hydrogeologist specialist. We're concerned with drilling our wells and that sort of thing. So we will, I will defer most of the information sharing to those folks. They are the professionals that we use to make our decisions, and allow them to shed some light on what has been going on. This all began, like I said, about a year ago when we started the process of rehabbing and replacing our well 3 site at on Schofield Ave. And well 7 was drilled at that site. And at that point, it had to be tested. It was tested and PFAS levels were found in it. As of October, we had the state, the Department of Environmental Protection set levels. And with that, it set the notification process in play. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to Mary Jude Pigsley and Mariel Stone of MassDEP. I believe they have a slide presentation, and we'll be able to share some very valuable information with us. Obviously, if anyone who's in attendance of the meeting has questions for either of them, we will have a chance to have those answered. Mary Jude?
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Jen, did you get the slide deck? Hopefully it came through.
Yes, I did.
Okay, super. So if you want to just put that up, I'll start. I really appreciate the opportunity for Marielle and I to be here tonight. I'm the regional director of the DEP office in Worcester, which is 77 cities and towns from New Hampshire to Rhode Island and from Southborough to the Brookfields. Marielle and I have been dealing with PFAS and giving some version of this presentation to communities for almost 2 years. It was February 2 years ago when we first came up with an informational presentation for the town of Hudson to talk about PFAS in their water. So as things have changed, we've tweaked our presentation, but the purpose is really just to give you some overall information about PFAS, talk about how and why MassDEP regulates them, and then why are we talking about PFAS in Dudley, just sort of put it in context of the public education materials that went out, and maybe be able to address some of the questions through the presentation. And then if you have questions following, we are more than happy to take your questions. I talk fast, so I apologize in advance. It's hard to talk about this stuff without using acronyms. There's going to be a little bit of math toward the end. So just want to get that out there in the beginning so you're prepared. So if you want to go to the next slide, we'll talk about what are PFAS. They're per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, hence the PFAS. There are thousands of them. They have a chemical structure that involves carbon and fluorine bonds, which are pretty much indestructible chemical bonds, which makes them incredibly stable. They're called forever chemicals because they are almost impossible to destroy. You have to incinerate them at something like 1,000 degrees Celsius in order to break those bonds. They're water soluble, and some of them are very toxic. The toxicity appears to depend on the length of the molecule. The more carbon fluorine bonds, the longer the molecule seems to have higher toxicity to humans. So this is what they are. If you want to go to the next slide, this is where you find them. They're man-made chemicals. They came into existence in the 40s. They are not sticky. So any kind of application that you can think of that involves things not being sticky, like waterproofing on your boots or your jacket, paper coatings like in the takeout containers that you get, ski wax, hairspray. There's a lot of talk about the aqueous film-forming foam, AFFF firefighting foam that contained PFAS chemicals. So the stuff has been out and about in the environment, in human use since the 40s. The slide says most Americans have been exposed to some level of PFAS. Most people in the entire world have been exposed to some levels of PFAS. We saw one study that said, I can't remember if it was 98 or 99% of the people in the entire world have some level of PFAS in their blood, just because of the ubiquitousness, the ubiquity of these in use. So we can go to the next slide. We're concerned about PFAS in drinking water, and there are other ways of being exposed to PFAS, which are standard takes into effect cumulative exposures, but our number is a drinking water exposure. What it is aimed at sensitive groups, which are pregnant women, nursing mothers, and infants, as well as immunocompromised individuals who drink contaminated water, and the drinking includes cooking with it for things like rice or pasta that absorb water. So sensitive groups who drink the water in a residential setting. That is the most protected group, and the standard that we set of 20 parts per trillion is based on protecting that group from exposure for even a short period of time. So if you're not in the sensitive subpopulation, there's relatively less risk. You are not in a residential use, you're in a restaurant or an office building. Bathing and washing vegetables are also uses that are relatively less of concern. You can reduce your exposure regardless of the number, if it's 20 or 0 or whatever you don't feel comfortable with. People can reduce their exposure to PFAS in drinking water by drinking and cooking with bottled water. There are also home treatment systems that you can buy. It's a little bit complicated to explain that there's nothing you can buy that is certified to meet the level that Massachusetts has set, 20 parts per trillion for 6 PFAS compounds. You can get treatment systems that will are certified by the NSF to treat to below 70 for 2 of the most common compounds. But even a system that's treating to 70 for 2 compounds will take out a lot of PFAS. So you just can't buy something right now that's certified to get to 20. The NSF updates its website literally every day. There are lots and lots of new treatment technologies coming online, and somebody is going to make a lot of money selling these things. So, what I say today could change tomorrow in terms of the availability of things that people can put in their homes. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is how we've regulated PFAS and why we've regulated PFAS. Our state drinking water regulations come from the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, but we are a delegated state. So we take the federal regulations as a starting point, and then we can have regulations on top of that. But the EPA, every 5 or so years, issues what they call the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, the UCMR. And they pick 20 to 30 substances that are, as the name says, unregulated. And they say, let's have all the public water systems in the entire country that serve more than 10,000 people sample for these chemicals. And we'll see how much they occur in the environment. We'll see where they are, and maybe we should regulate them. So in the third round of the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, the UCMR3, PFAS were included. So we had systems in the Commonwealth, not Dudley, too small, but had to sample for PFAS, and we started finding it in a lot of places. We started finding more than just the 2 that EPA was proposing to regulate. The science has been developing really quickly. The science is coming in from all over the world. As I said, this is a global problem. There's a lot of studies that are coming out of Australia, for example. So our Office of Research and Standards is charged with setting these risk-based standards for all of our programs. Looking at all the science, looking at what we were seeing in the sampling that was going on in Massachusetts, we determined to make 2 regulations. The same number, 20 parts per trillion, for 6 of the specific PFAS compounds. One is a drinking water standard. So this is a level that you should not exceed in your public water supply. And the other is a cleanup standard. If you have a 21E site or a waste site cleanup site, you have to treat the groundwater to be below that 20 parts per trillion if it's in an area that is or could be used as a drinking water supply. So the number is the same for drinking water suppliers and for cleaning up contaminated sites. What this doesn't regulate are private wells. I mean, the science is the same. It's a risk-based health standard, but regulations under the drinking water program don't apply to people who have private wells. So we have information on our website that explains all of the same science and answers questions that private well owners might have. But this presentation and the scope of DEP's regulation is only related to the public water supply. So if you want to go to the next slide. Just so you can see what's happening in other parts of the country, and I actually have very late breaking news on this. Marielle and I got an email today that some of the states have done what we've done. Connecticut and Vermont take a sum of 5. We have 6. Some states do a chemical by chemical standard, a not to exceed for PFAS, for PFOA. EPA has not set a regulation. They just have an advisory number, which is 70, which you can see on the chart, for the sum of PFAS and PFOA together. Today or yesterday, they announced that they will be regulating through a drinking water standard, a nationwide drinking water standard. They will be regulating PFAS in the form of PFAS and PFOA to start with. But now in the 5th round of the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, the UCMR 5 that they're developing now, they're going to add 20, 26, 29 more PFAS chemicals that they're going to ask drinking water systems to look for. So this chart will be updated at some point when EPA issues a federal regulation, but we have a regulation that we issued in October. So we have had an enforceable drinking water regulation since October, and it applies to all public water systems. That's anybody who supplies drinking water to 25 or more people, 60 more days a year, 60 or more days a year. And it's everything from the city of Boston, or city of Worcester, to a coffee shop that serves 25 people. So the same standard applies to all the public water supplies in the state. So why are we talking about Dudley? Look at the next slide. This is the one that I'm going to spend a little bit of time on. So the regulation didn't become effective until October, but we knew we were going to do it. It takes a long time to pass regulations. We had work groups. We have Health Effects Advisory Committee with the Department of Public Health, who helps us come up with risk-based standards. We were doing outreach to the water supply community. So people knew that it was coming. And as Scott mentioned, when the proposed well was being tested, we had said, even though there's not a regulation yet, anybody who's proposing to bring a new well online will need to sample for PFAS. And that's why the proposed well 7 was tested. But even before October, when the regulation came into effect, the governor had put money in the budget for DEP to be able to offer to do a first round of PFAS sampling for every single public water system in the state. So from the biggest to the smallest, everyone can sign up and the Commonwealth will pay for 1 round of testing. And Dudley decided to do that, which is a good thing. Under the regulation, Dudley is in the size of system where the monitoring doesn't have to start until October of 2021. But at that point, there won't be any DEP money for free sampling available. And it's a good thing to know if you have an issue so that you can deal with it, in this case, in connection with other water system improvements you might be making, rather than being in the position of some communities who may have just built a $20 million treatment plant and now there's a new regulation and they have to kind of start all over again. So I commend the town for taking the step to do the sampling in advance. So to walk through the chart, it's important to note there are 2 lines that are in bold. Those are the places where the water enters the distribution system. This is the water that people are drinking. The water samples that are raw are not the water that people drink. It goes out and is treated and goes out, and that's where we measure compliance. The way that we measure compliance is at the point of entry into the distribution system. You take a sample. You have to be really careful not to use a waterproof notebook, not to have used a certain kind of deodorant, not to have cross-contaminated the sample with PFAS in any way, which is actually fairly easy to do if you don't take the appropriate precautions, because it is in so many things. So you take the sample. It goes to the lab. It takes about 3 weeks for that sample to be turned around, and the sample comes back. If you get a detection, not even an exceedance, if you get any kind of detection, you automatically have to take a confirmation sample. And the point of that is to make sure there wasn't cross-contamination. You take the second sample to confirm the first. So you get 2 samples, you add them together, you take the average, and that's your number. So if you look at in March and April, the sampling that was done, and I'm not sure I get the right nomenclature right, how you refer to your wells, but O3G, the average of the March and the April samples was 16. There wasn't a regulation in place then anyway, but even if the regulation had been in place, it was below 20. So fast forward to October, and then the second one, the confirmation sample, was taken in December. The average there was 27, which is above the drinking water standard of 20. At the New Boston Road, well, 06G, there was only 1 sample taken in March, but the sampling in October and December, you add them together, you divide by 2, and because the standard is 2 significant figures, 20, we round to 2 significant figures for the compliance number. So the compliance number for that one is 10, which is only half of the standard. So I know that's, you know, a lot of math, but the point is the compliance location is at the point of entry into the distribution system, and it is a number that is generated as an average of an initial and a confirmation sample. So it takes 3 weeks to get the first one. It takes another 3 weeks to get the second one. You do the math, and then you have the number. In this case, the sampling that happened on December 1st, we got the results on the 15th. That's significant because under the regulation, if you have a number that exceeds the drinking water standard, you have to provide either public education materials or public notice. They're long documents. You've seen the public education materials. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of text in that document. You have 30 days to do that. So the 30 days for Dudley started running on December 15th when the confirmation sample came back. And I think the date of the public education materials was the 5th or something like that. So it went out quickly once we got the confirmation sample, and the system has been working with our staff, the drinking water section chief who works for Marielle, to get the document together. It's a form. It looks like a form, I know. It's a form so that every water system in the state provides the same information in the same way to its customers. So it has to, by nature, cover a lot of different situations. I'm sure people, the water and sewer commissioners, would have liked to rewrite it in their own words. We hear that a lot from people. Unfortunately, you can't. You need to use our words. So I apologize if it is hard to read and clunky, but there's a lot of information that we're trying to get out there with this. If the system exceeds 20 for 3 months in a row, it will then be in violation of the standard. It's not just that you exceeded the standard, and this is really delicate word parsing, I know, but it says on the top of the public education materials, we are not in violation of the standard, and that's correct, because the standard requires a quarterly average of 3 months. So until there are 3 monthly samples that you then average for a quarterly number, you're not violating the rule. We asked you to do the public education, though, because of that sensitive subpopulation that we talked about, the pregnant women, nursing mothers, and infants, who for a short term even can have elevated risk if they're drinking the water that's over 20. So the system is not in violation of the standard because there aren't enough months to see, and the system, once the blending begins, may not violate the standard. But if there's a month in which the water exceeds 20, we ask you to do this public education outreach, and we realize that it does present a lot of questions to people, and we're happy to do these kind of presentations to explain it because it is really, really complicated. So the next slide. So we're doing a lot. We are going to communities and explaining the regulations and how it works. We developed the standards. We're working with communities that have exceedances to try to figure out where it's coming from. We don't have a site discovery program anymore since the cleanup program that we have is privatized, but we do have ways of sending out requests for information. For example, looking through our databases to see what sort of industrial facilities that may have used these compounds are in the area. So we're trying to work with communities to help find out where is it coming from. You know that it's there. You are taking steps to eliminate or reduce the exposure, but then you would really like to find out where it's coming from. So we are trying to help with that as well. And then the last slide is just, if you want to find out about PFAS, I strongly suggest that you just Google MassDEP PFAS. It's as easy as that. And you can see on the slide where you'll come up and just click on that link. We have so much information on our website, and it's information that's specific to Massachusetts. It's specific to the 6 compounds that we regulate. There's everything on there from information about bottled water companies that have tested their water for PFAS, and we have those available if people are interested to see where what water companies have PFAS-free water. We have the information about the NSF certification and the links to that. We have an FAQ document for private well owners, an FAQ document for public water system operators, an FAQ document for public water supply consumers. We have links to all of the underlying science that supported the development of this risk-based number, all of the studies from everywhere to show what went into deriving that number that came up to be 20 for the sum of 6. So it's a lot better to get your information from DEP than just Googling things or reading things in the paper or on social media, because we're the ones who are regulating, and you should ask the questions of us. And if we need to do another meeting, we'd be happy to do that. Town administrator knows how to reach me. Board of Water Sewer commissioners know how to reach me. They have my cell phone number. I would much rather provide the information, answer the questions, no matter how many questions. And if I can't answer the questions and Marielle can't answer the questions tonight, we can certainly take questions back to the director of our Office of Research and Standards, who was responsible for developing the drinking water number, to people in the drinking water program. I mean, we will get you the information, because that's we owe you that. We have a regulation and we owe it to you to be able to explain how to comply with it. So that's it. And I'm sorry I talked fast, but I'm happy to take any questions, or you all can just sort of digest this and talk about what comes next. I know we've spoken a little bit with the commissioners about changes that are going to be made to the system to blend the water from the different sources. Our drinking water program staff have been working with you on that. So that's certainly something that we're interested in hearing about how that goes too. So, but thank you for letting me babble about PFAS.
Does anybody in attendance have any questions for Mary Jude?
Have one, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
First of all, thank you, Mary Jude, for following up on our phone conversation last week, this past week. And I mean, this has been very informative and I think very helpful. And I know Jen has the slide deck. I'd like to post that at some point after tonight. We'll of course post this meeting as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about the process of blending to reduce the parts per trillion to gain compliance, and DEP's feelings on that?
Blending is a way that a lot of systems are achieving compliance, and it makes sense when you think about The compliance point is the point of entry into the system. So you can have multiple wells and you can manipulate the draw from the wells to accomplish getting lower than 20 at the point of distribution. So if you have a well that's at 26, but it blends with two lower concentration wells, the number that we look at is the number that's going out into the system. So it makes a lot of sense for the town to attempt to reduce the exposure through blending rather than jumping straight to treatment, which some communities have had to do because they don't have an opportunity to blend. But blending is definitely acceptable and something that we are happy to help with in light of the experience we've seen other communities have with working a blend.
Thanks. And Jeff, Mr. Chairman, through you, Jeff, that's what we're currently, Jeff is our engineering consultant for the water, the overall water project. That's what we're currently doing, right? To try to remediate the problem?
Yeah, so I can give a little background. The town has taken 2 engineering steps to deal with PFAS. The first step, once the PFAS levels at station number 3 were known to be a little bit above the pending regulation, a process went through to design a blending water main to connect pump station 3 site to the pump station 6 site, which is about 2,000 feet apart. So a new water main was constructed, and there is a little bit more work that is being done at the station number 3 before it's activated. But I believe the town is ready to activate that likely in February. And at that point, the station 3 site and the station 6 site will be tied to run together in tandem so that the blend occurs with the well 3 site, which was just over the 20 regulation, and the well 6 site, which was around 10. So you need to do a little bit of math, and the town will need to do monthly samples, but that blend looks feasible, at least in the interim period, but not necessarily in the long term. The blended average in theory is going to be in the 16, 17 parts per trillion. So the town has also initiated a second step, and they are proceeding with pilot testing for a permanent treatment plant at the well 6 site. And that treatment, pilot treatment design is currently ongoing, planned to be completed by June. But then that will lead into a couple of other subsequent steps over the remaining part of this year. And if the town decides to move forward into a treatment plant construction project.
Thanks. Can I have one more, Mr. Chairman? Then I'm sure there's
Sure.
one of the selectmen want to jump in, or maybe.
Sure.
So part of the presentation, Mary Jude, the presence of the existence of PFAS was discovered in the 40s, you said?
They were actually created. They're man-made chemicals. They were
Created?
created
Okay.
in the 40s. Yeah.
And just to go back to the timeline, because I think it's very important. It's not like the town knew about the presence of this emerging contaminant since the 40s and did nothing to address it. Could you just kind of backtrack and summarize how you understand the town's timeline to be addressing the problem?
Sure. Nobody was looking for PFAS until 2000. I think EPA put out the UCMR3 rule in 2012 or 2013, and then the states have time to start looking at that. Only systems who serve more than 10,000 people have to do that kind of sampling. So Dudley was not one of those communities, but towns that did that sampling started their sampling in around 2014. That's when, as a state, we started seeing it in a lot of different places because of these larger systems that were required to sample. even with this regulation that came out in October, Dudley's not required to do this sampling until October of 2021. So the contaminants were not on anybody's radar, not on DEP's radar, until EPA issued the rule, like I said, it's around 2012. But our regulation became effective in October. There is an obligation to start complying with it, with certain parts of it. But the obligation to start taking the samples for compliance purposes hasn't even kicked in for you yet. So you're ahead of the game. It's not that there was information available that the town didn't act on. The town has been out ahead of the information for a community its size.
Great, thanks. I have another one, but I'll hold on it if somebody else wants to jump in.
Is there anyone else? I have one question, but is there anyone else that has anything?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a few things. I'm thank you for setting this up. We've pointed out that this is a town issue, right? Mary Jude and Marielle, thanks for being here. I'm John Marcy, Vice Chairman of the board. Obviously even though we're being very forward thinking in our handling of PFAS, other towns aren't doing it. But one of our big initiatives is to be very transparent with the town and really understand when they get letters in the mail. A lot of it's technical terms, and people just see what that there's something bad and what do I do next. So what I'm looking for this team to do, all of us together as a town, is to figure out people have real concerns. I know it's it doesn't seem, we can blend water to make the water we're down. People have concerns about that. I know it's not something we can really get rid of until we have a specific treatment plant. I'm a chemical engineer by trade. I understand how this stuff works. So what do we tell our residents? I want everybody to feel comfortable that this town is trying to fix the problem and feel that their water is going to be safe. I have a few questions, but that's my first. What do we say, to our residents?
So what we require in the public education materials, that's what we would suggest that you say. The whole point of doing public education when you're not technically out of compliance with the regulation is to have that level of transparency and to share information with people. So the necessary information is to say what the PFAS are, to say what your sampling showed, and to include the health effects language that is in the notification. Even if your PFAS level was below 10, you would have to disclose that in the annual consumer confidence report anyway. It wouldn't be a mailing like this, but you do have to notify people, and that same health effects language that's in the document is what the regulation requires you to tell people. And that's what DEP requires. What the town wants to tell people about what you're doing to correct it is up to you all. I mean, when we send out the form, it has that required information that we have in the regulation that you have to say, and then we leave a blank that says what we are doing. And it's really important for the town to fill that in so that people are comfortable, like in this case, that there is an answer, which is blending. There are some communities that don't have that answer. Some communities have maybe an interconnection. Some
Or filtration of some sort, right?
They may have treatment that works for PFAS, but usually not, because if you were sampling after the treatment, you wouldn't be seeing the PFAS. So, but I encourage this kind of presentation because people do have questions, and that's what I'm hopeful that between the language in the letter, the public education materials, and something like this, we can address the concerns, and people have more specific questions should go to the website and look at the wealth of information that's there. But the message is DEP set a standard. the drinking water entering the system on these dates as an average exceeded that number. Here's what that means in terms of health. MassDEP recommends that pregnant women, nursing mothers, and infants do not consume water when it exceeds that number. It's a recommendation. Everybody has their own level of comfort with risk. And for some people, the number of any kind of contamination in my drinking water should be 0. And that's a perfectly understandable position. For some people, they will look at it and they'll say, I am not in one of those sensitive subpopulations. I am very comfortable continuing to drink this water because I am not in that group and I am comfortable with this description of a lifetime risk. And it's just the information has to get out there so that people can make their own decisions about their level of comfort. So we really encourage sharing of all the data when it comes in, keeping people in the loop. And as I said, if people are really interested in this, you can spend a lot of time reading the stuff on our website. And we've had people who do that, and then they call and they have very specific science questions. And we refer them to our Office of Research and Standards, and they answer the questions. We have people who are concerned and do talk to their healthcare professional, and that person is really not aware of what's going on with PFAS, and they can call us, and we can connect up healthcare professionals with our Department of Public Health, and they can provide information from healthcare to provider to doctor or whatever. We've made those connections for people in the past. So beyond the general information, when it gets more specific on a person-by-person basis, I would hope that the Board of Health can be a partner with us in disseminating information. And as I said, you should just reach out. I mean, that's why DEP is here.
No, I appreciate that answer. I mean, it's a basic utility, right? Basic fundamental, question. If I'm somebody that, doesn't, isn't involved in the day-to-day basis of like Dudley's water system, right? So breaking it down to a simple, yes or no is difficult, and everything in life is risk-based, as we've learned over the last year, right? But you touched on the groups that could be more affected by that. And now this question goes to you, Mary Jude. What have towns done, and to the rest of the team? What can we do for those residents that fall into one of those, that are really, really nervous? They're on the town water, and what can we do to help them? I think there's been a lot of requests for bottled water or some sort of something like that. Have we thought about that at all, and something we can be proactive about? Oh, Mr. Chairman, you or Mary Jude, team?
We've talked about it a bit. We haven't had a meeting since this flowed out. This statement was mailed out. But there have been a few different thoughts about bottled water. It's hard to I can't speak for, I can only speak for myself and what my thoughts are. I'm not in the sensitive subgroup, and I do consume the water and I do cook with it, and I will continue to do so because I am comfortable with the plan forward.
But for those that aren't,
There
what's
have
our
been
answer?
thoughts. There have been thoughts about, distribution of bottled water is very labor intensive and costly. That cost has to be borne by something, which will be borne by the water and sewer budget. That gets passed directly back to the users. That's just the reality of it. The other thought was that if you are if you are one who chooses to use bottled water for cooking and drinking, and you choose to do that at home, I did it here for a number of years ago. I had a machine, but I do not do that now. The thought was, if you are using bottled water for cooking and drinking, then you are not flowing water out of your tap, which is not flowing through the meter, is not being billed. So you're not paying for that water that you would have normally used. What's the comparison in cost? I haven't had a chance to do that in math, but I don't know. There's been a suggestion of abating receipts. That again, that there are issues with that as well that have to be discussed, but it's okay. Yeah, it's something we do need to discuss. Yes.
Okay, no, I appreciate it, Scott. I mean, I'm trying to solve this as a team.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea. If people in those subgroups, I think we should think about the school. We have a lot of, kids and putting them as part of the program, whatever we would come up with. Maybe there's some sort of up to a certain amount of water that we would, they would bring a receipt in and get reimbursed or something like that. I think that sounds like a good start. I just think we really need to provide an option for people who, rely on town water and they don't have another alternative per se. So no, thanks for that. My last question, Mr. Chairman, one more, please.
Sure.
Another question we've heard from residents is around wells. And I think I heard, Mary Jude, in your presentation, you had that in there, that it wasn't really part of the DEP's, wheelhouse or part of the jurisdiction. But, social media being what it is, people, say, well, if you live near that well where the pump is drawing, then that could be of concern and you should get tested. And so I'm really looking to put people at ease on some of these issues. And what do we tell people with wells like that? Say you have a well, wherever they are in Dudley, is this something that they need to run out and pay a lot of money to get tested, or I know it comes back to risk, but what's the message there?
Yeah. So people should be testing their private wells on an annual basis anyway. I don't know if Dudley has a bylaw for private well testing, but people should be taking care of their water. They should be sampling it. And if people are concerned that they might have PFAS in their water, they could just add PFAS to the things that they would normally sample for every year. As I was explaining about how sensitive it is to take those samples and not cross-contaminate and things like that. We have labs that are certified on our website that are certified to run the EPA method to do the analysis. If someone is going to hire a water testing company, they should absolutely be telling you that they're going to use a lab that MassDEP has certified as being able to run its EPA method 537.1. The information's on our website. And to make sure that the person who's taking the sample understands that you shouldn't be wrapping it up in something with wax paper around it, kind of thing. I mean, it sounds obvious, but if you don't know about PFAS, you have no idea.
Exactly right. Exactly.
So to make sure that you're not getting your water sampling kit from BJ's. That's not going to help you. Nothing against BJ's, but I mean, that's not the kind of water sampling we're talking about. It can cost around $300 or $350 for a sample. I think the costs have been coming down. In the beginning, there were maybe only 1 or 2 labs that we had certified to run the method, and now there are more. So I think the prices are coming down, but it is expensive. It's $300 to $350. People can certainly skip right over the testing and say, I don't know, but I'm going to drink bottled water. That's the same kind of thing. It's a decision that people can make. If there's PFAS in the water and they want to provide treatment, there are 2 options. One is a sort of a sink mounted unit that you can get at Home Depot that's like a Brita filter. And one of the treatment technologies for PFAS is carbon. I mean, it's actually very simple treatment. So you can go on that NSF website and look at the cartridges that you can buy for your tap. And that will tell you if it's certified to meet the EPA advisory number of 70 parts per trillion for the two. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed to get to zero, but it is guaranteed to take out some of the PFAS. Or you can buy a system that treats all of the water coming into your house. So the water, the showers and the toilets and everything, all of the water into the house, which is expensive. And depending on the type of system, it creates issues with what you can do with the water that's left over from the treatment. You can't put it in your septic system and you can't put it in the ground. So before you think about investing thousands of dollars in a treatment system, we'd like to partner with the boards of health on these kind of things, work with the Board of Health to talk to us to figure out if that makes sense, or if you're going to be creating more trouble by taking this reject water and putting it right into the ground near your well.
Right.
So there's pros and cons about the treatment.
Yeah. And I think all of this comes down to, like, say, communication. You know, the water sewer board has done a fantastic job getting ahead of this and documenting and putting the project together. You know, we're all agreed that we put this through town meeting, which was approved. So we're solving this problem, or on our way to solving this problem. We just have a plan in place. So I'm pretty, you know, that's how Dudley rolls, so to speak, right? I mean, we try to get ahead of things, and it, you know, but then again, when you try to tell people about something, be transparent, then that's when we get more questions. So I appreciate your availability, Marielle, water sewer commissioners. You guys have, you know, 100,000 years of experience, you know, about living in Dudley and what we should do. So anybody else have any other questions that you've heard? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time.
Mr. Chairman. If I need to summarize this in the simplest possible way, would we say that this specification required for PFAS was 70, is now going to 20, and Dudley has a plan to get there? Is anyone in disagreement with that? Good, thank you.
Oh, Scott, you're on mute.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that is a very simplified summation, I guess. We do have a plan. We have been working on it for quite a while. We had to, you know, we were waiting. As far as the public notification, we made that once we knew what we were notifying about, which was in October. We had to do the tests as of October, and that's how it played out. I did have one question in the public education statement. There were in a couple of places it said something about that the 20 parts per trillion was based on a lifetime consumption of the water. And then you, Mary Jude, you had mentioned during your slide presentation about a cumulative effect. Could you just expound on that just a little bit?
I will try. We're getting into the depths of science. And
yeah, I understand that. Yep.
The invitation was on short notice, but we have done presentations with the director of our Office of Research and Standards, who could go on at length to answer your question. I will tell you my understanding, but we can certainly revisit it if people have more questions about it.
If we can get that answer in a written form,
Well, I
we
mean,
could,
the document does try to explain it, and obviously not well enough. But our drinking water standards are typically developed on a lifetime exposure. You drink 2 liters of the water every day. You're a person of a certain weight, 2 liters a day, every day for 70 years. And that's a lifetime exposure number. And that's what this would be, except for these groups for whom even a short-term period can increase the risk. So the number that they established for the lifetime risk is the same number as for the most protected risk. So if you took out that subpopulation, the number would be different, but there's no point in having one number for one group and another number for another group. So the 20 parts per trillion is protective of the drinking water for the most sensitive groups, and therefore by extension, everybody else, if that makes sense.
okay,
So it is, I mean, the drinking water standards are set to be protective for a lifetime of drinking the water. This number was derived to also protect certain people for even short-term exposures. So it's like a super conservative layer of conservativeness, the way we put these numbers out. I don't know if that helps.
and without wandering too much into the realm of social media and the buzz that was there, one person had commented that they had been getting sick for, commented earlier that you had seen it, that one person said that they were getting sick since September or October, and was vomiting and all of this kind of stuff. And now she knows because it was because of the contaminants in our water. Is that a possibility?
The effects of PFAS are what is outlined in the document. So it's not like an acute contaminant, like you had bacteria in the water and you had to do a boil order. Those are the kind of symptoms you might have. The PFAS, the health effects are outlined in the document. It's more of developmental effects and certain cancer risks. It's not an acute reaction like it would be to E. coli. It's not gastrointestinal.
Okay, thank you. That's where I was that's what I was aiming at. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Mary Jude?
Just one last one, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Go ahead.
So I'll qualify the question first a little bit. Based on what you know, is the DEP satisfied that the town of Dudley is taking a proactive approach in accordance to what DEP requires us to do?
The town is doing everything that DEP requires and more. You're doing it sooner than you have to, and we don't require you to have public forums on things. We require you to send out the educational materials, and that's it. So you don't even technically have to take any steps to reduce it below 20. You could just continue to be serving water over the standard and make sure that you told people so that they could make informed decisions. I think the right thing to do is exactly what you're doing. Even before the standard came into effect, try to figure out how to do the blend and then ultimately how to get to treatment. So, I mean, I can't think of anything else that we would ask or expect the town of Dudley to do.
So when we talked about, through the chair, we talked about not wanting to deviate too much from the DEP guidance that had to go out when we tested. When the PFAS level was tested, there was a requirement from DEP based on an EPA document that we notify the public that it tested at this level. How do you suggest that we separate public information like we're doing now from mandatory reporting to the public? In other words, I think there was some confusion initially that to put out a lot of information because we weren't entirely certain well, we were entirely certain internally what the story was, but we wanted to make sure that we didn't write or publish or provide the public information that in any way conflicted with what DEP was saying. So what would you advise in the future when we get to this point, when we are going to put out a notice that is not particularly, in my opinion, user-friendly or easy for the public to interpret? How would you propose that we proceed to let the public know that something like this is coming? Should we do something like this in advance?
That's completely up to you. I mean, every community is different. I do again apologize for the way this reads. It's just hard to talk about things that have 10-syllable names without it ending up looking the way it does. Our requirement is that you tell people what a maximum contaminant level is, what your results were, the dates of the sampling, and to include the health effects language. From community to community, there might be people who really want to provide a wealth of the science behind the numbers. There are other people who would really prefer that this be less than a page because people aren't going to want to read anything else. It's impossible to say. What I can say is what we require. And then beyond that, I'm more than happy to look at things that people may write just to make sure that they don't contradict anything in our regulations, because the regulation is really complicated, and I do this for a living, and I think this regulation is really complicated. So I'm happy to take a look at things, to look at something different, as long as you do that which is required by DEP. You can't substitute. You can do anything else that you would like to do in terms of developing your own fact sheet, your own Q&A documents, anything like that. You just run the risk of contradicting us in some way, which is why we've tried to put so much material on the website in terms of FAQs and fact sheets and things that are not as dense as this required notification is. It's not easy to explain, unfortunately.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, this is where we drive people to the website first, because I think that beyond the first paragraph of a notification, we probably lose everybody and it becomes Facebook based.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's that last slide. I mean, it really is as easy as Googling MassDEP PFAS. It takes you right to where you'll get the information that's relevant to Massachusetts. And when you get there, there's just so many links that you can click on, and they will take you to so many other links. It's weeks of reading if you click through link after link after link. It's extremely expensive. Or you can go in, you can read the FAQs, and you can be done.
And Mr. Chairman, the DP is the regulatory body for the state, so that if, you know, any member of the community wanted to double check or watchdog what the water and sewer commissioners are doing to see if it's in compliance, they could certainly reach out directly to DEP and they'd be able to answer questions directly, right, Mary Jude?
Yeah, I can tell you tonight the town of Dudley is in compliance with the PFAS regulation. I'm going to put Marielle on the spot. There's nothing they're out of compliance with that we know otherwise, right?
That is correct. I'm not aware of any other, outstanding water quality issues.
So, Mr. Chairman, may I?
Go ahead.
So Marielle and Mary Jude, we're ahead of the curve. We've established that, but other towns and cities that are also ahead of the curve and have they, couple of parts of this. A, have they had a similar reaction from its residents? And B, what did those municipalities do to, put their populace at ease or provide any mitigation in the time from planning to solution?
Yeah, I mean, the reactions, again, it's everybody's different. It's some communities have had social media groups that were formed for other reasons, neighborhood groups and things, and those became a sort of place where people were discussing PFAS. People in one community would write up questions, and the town administrator sent them to me, and I wrote back in writing, and they posted that on the group Facebook page, so that the information was just cut and pasted from something the DEP said. I really not encouraging people to become my email correspondents through Facebook, but if there are, enough questions about a certain aspect of this, and the town wants to send it to me, and we will respond in writing, and it has a way of getting out to a broader audience, that serves the purpose of communicating information, which is what we're trying to do. Other communities, in terms of mitigating, I mean, we've had communities who have been fortunate enough to just be able to take a source offline, and they have enough water otherwise, and it's not a problem, and that well is just offline. We have towns that have interconnections with other towns that they can purchase water. We have communities who are doing the blending. We have communities who have gone all the way through and have installed treatment. In terms of communities who had no choice but to serve water over 20, we had one town that did attempt to provide bottled water, but one of the sources of the contamination was pretty obvious, and the department issued a notification under Chapter 21E to that company and said, you're contaminating the public water supply. The company paid for the bottled water, but the complexity of providing bottled water was really borne by the town, by the DPW, because it's so difficult pre-COVID, but people want to pick up the water on the weekend, and the DPW wants to get paid for working on the weekend. And there was a network of scout troops and church groups and volunteers for a month who were at the DPW garage after hours on weekends doing the water drop off. We have another community who saw that as an example and did the rebate system that the chair was talking about, where you have your receipts of bottled water and you bring them in and it gets applied against your water bill. And in that community, it was, there was no point in asking, where is your member of a sensitive subpopulation? It was an offer that was made available to all of the customers. And that seemed to work very well for that community until they were able to accomplish some changes in their system to get below the 20, and ultimately they're going to be installing treatment as well. There are other systems where people have not been interested. I mean, we have done this kind of presentation we have offered it anytime that we have the situation, and there are some towns where there has been no interest in such a meeting, which is great, which gives me some small hope that the information we're putting out there in writing actually is helpful to people. So it really, there is no one answer.
Okay, no, that was helpful. I mean, it's always, we look to like, how have others solved the problem? That's where I was getting at there. So no,
Yeah,
that was very, very helpful. Thank
Yeah.
you, Mayor Jude. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe. No. And if anybody really needs any reading, a lot of this is all under 310 CMR 22, correct?
it's 310 CMR 22.07 capital G.
07G. I did read through part of that the other night till my brain hurt. But that's difficult reading. But if anybody in the public wants to read, to see the law that's behind all of this, it is 310 CMR 22.07G. And it is quite, it's not that hard to understand, but it is very, very in-depth.
It's very detailed. And actually, I apologize. I should have said earlier, there's a mistake in the, it's like, I'm not sure if it's a typo or it's just a math mistake in the public education materials. When we were putting together the chart that's in the slides, because of all the averaging and the rounding and everything, the numbers on the slide are the correct numbers. Just trying to get there on my, so the station 3, I guess you could, the average is 27, not 29.
Oh, well,
And I know when you're talking parts per trillion, that's not a big difference, but we didn't catch the math error when we reviewed the document before it went out. It doesn't have any kind of material change, but I just wanted to make sure that nobody sits with the slides and with the public education materials and it looks like there's a discrepancy. The numbers on the slide are correct.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Jeff Faulkner from Ty and Bond. Can
Sure.
I offer one more piece of information?
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to go to you next anyways
Okay.
to start to talk about the timeline and what
Yep.
we've done since we found out what we've done, what we started doing, what we're doing now, and what the plan is in the near future.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start there. So as the information came available March, April, the design team and hydrogeologist team moved forward with some blending options, and a couple of town meeting articles were on the June 2020 town meeting to fund the 2 steps the town is taken so far. The town is also, the Water Sewer Commission has authorized the submission of an application to the DEP SRF program. So that was submitted in August of 2020. And that draft list of potential projects funded by that SRF program came out today. And Dudley did make the list as a fundable project for the treatment plant construction. So that's good news from the town's perspective, that if you choose to move forward with a permanent treatment plant, the SRF program is on board with funding that.
That's a loan. That's a loan, not a grant, correct?
It is a loan, and typically they offer 2% loans. At least last year, the PFAS loans were 0%. I have not confirmed whether the 0% translates to the next year's projects or not. I don't know if Mary Jude knows that or Marielle knows that, but it's likely that it would be a 0% interest loan.
I think you were going to try to extend that. I mean, Marielle, did that come up in the SRF review? Did you hear whether they were?
We can follow up though and check with the program on that.
Okay.
Okay, now is that, I know in the SRF that we use for the project that we have ongoing now, that there was some principal forgiveness. Is that part of it as well?
I believe you would still be eligible for principal forgiveness. Yes.
Okay, so that is in a sense a form of a grant. But
right,
yeah.
It's a portion of principal forgiveness. I think there's a percentage depending on how they do the math. Every year it varies.
Okay.
So I guess what I was going to lead to is the boards, the town administrator and other folks in town will need to decide whether they put a couple of articles on the Springtown meeting to move that permanent treatment plant project forward. In the timing of that would be that funded at Springtown meeting for both final design of the treatment plant, which is not funded by SRF, and another article for the construction, which would be funded by SRF. The final design would occur July to December of 2021, and the earliest the construction start would be spring of 2022.
A year from now. Okay.
Yep. In the construction of this style plants, 12 to 15 months.
Okay, and in the meantime, we would continue to blend our water and monitor it to keep it below the 20 parts per trillion.
Yes.
Right, DEP requires monthly monitoring. Once you have a level over 10, you have to sample every month.
I know I saw the sampling schedule this morning down at the water office, and PFAS is on it now, along with the multitude of other things that we test for on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis.
Right.
Okay. So the blending is as it's moving forward. The blending process should be online first or second week of February. Is that correct? Am I offline?
George said yes.
Okay. I didn't hear anything. All right. I just wanted to be sure. Jeff, you had PFAS. Was there something else that you had, Jeff?
It was mainly just to give you the news that the SRF list came out today.
Okay. And all right. So I think we.
The chair, Bill
Yeah,
Connolly.
Go ahead, sir.
To the chair, please.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, Scott, I think it would be a good time to remind people that part of the rate increases that took place last year and the rate increase that will take place this next coming fiscal year, these are all inclusive towards as a enterprise fund in paying off the loans for these projects. That this has been a plan put out by Tig and Ron Forrest, and that a lot of people have made comments to me about the increases. But we have to remind people that only 50% of the town is on the water system, and the water system and sewer system has to pay its way as an enterprise fund.
Yes, that is true. When I know some folks were quite upset when we even started talking about different ways to fund all of this. A debt exclusion was brought up at one point, just for discussion. But then the only way this all has to be paid for, and that's what we have been doing. We had a rate study that we had public hearings for. It was published out there, and we will be talking about it again at our next meeting for this year's, so that we can look at our rates, look at what our revenues are, and look at what our
Obligations will be.
Look what our obligations will be and what it's going to cost to continue to do business as a water system. I think it's important to, I guess, for folks who are concerned about their water rates, the water bills. We are in the midst of a very extensive meter replacement program. Many of our meters are well past their expected life, and we are replacing them. So if you had a meter that was faulty or just plain not working at all, and you were only paying a $25 water bill, when that meter gets replaced, your water bill will change, and it will be accurate. They're all tested, they're all certified to be accurate, and that can be another play in that. But in any case, Was there anything else? Did anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything else that they wanted to get for information from either our representatives from the DEP or our representatives from Ty and Bond?
I do have one question to the DEP. What I would like to know is, I have a reverse osmosis filter system. And I'm not sure, but it does a pretty good job. But does it filter out PFAS too? PFAS?
Reverse osmosis will treat for PFAS. My understanding is the system will generate a lot of reject water. And depending on the level of PFAS that's going into the system, if you're going to put reject water out that's over 20, you can't put that into your septic system or into an underground, into like a dry well. So it's a long answer. But RO works, but it's complicated to manage the high volume of water that's generated by that kind of treatment. If you don't know what the level is going out, you don't know if you're contaminating the ground.
So much like, say, removing asbestos from floor tiles or pipe insulation or anything like that, it has to be disposed of properly, is what you're saying.
Yep.
It does. I think the best way to be absolutely sure that you're not creating a problem for yourself would be to test the water. And if it's,
Right.
If there's PFAS that's less than 20 in the reject water, then you're fine. If there's no PFAS coming out of the well, then you don't really need the treatment anyway. So, without data, it's really hard to figure out what you would want to do.
Right. Thank
So
you.
it needs to be tested then.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Sullivan would like to speak.
Sure.
He has his little hand up, I saw.
Which Mr. Sullivan is this? Is this ours, yours?
That's
Yours.
Bob Sullivan.
Oh, Bob. Okay, Bob. That's ours. Okay.
Yeah, I have a few things that I wanted to throw out while DEP's on the phone or on the line. I think there was comments out there, why haven't we fixed it and got, taken care of this and taken the contaminant out? I don't know if they can explain the timeline that's involved in the permitting. There's multiple things that need to take place in order to put treatment on. You need to do a pilot study that needs to be approved through DEP. It's not like we can just say, hey, we found this treatment and throw it online. And not to mention it has to go through town meeting and we have to have funding available. Like the SRF funding, we need to approve it at town meeting prior to even being eligible for SRF. There's just a lot of steps in place and it's not something that you can do overnight. So that's one point.
Yeah, and that's correct. I mean, you can't put on treatment without our approval. And there is a process. And like I said, Marielle's staff works with systems. We prioritize the PFAS treatment systems. They go absolutely to the top of the pile. We have turned around applications for treatment systems in a week, which is unheard of. But this is important work. And when you get us our application, assuming that it has all of the elements that it needs to have, we will turn it around as quickly as possible. And Marielle and her team have done an absolutely fabulous job about delivering on that.
I know our permit for the blending came pretty quick.
Yeah, the blending permit came through before the water main construction, and recently the approval for the pilot testing proposal came through. Now the pilot study will be undertaken, and a pilot report will be prepared, and DEP also approves the pilot report.
Yeah, I happened to notice this morning that in the next room over from Bob Sullivan, there are 10 big barrels of water that have been drawn that are waiting for that pilot study. So yeah, it is ongoing. It's being done as we speak. So the stuff it's mind-boggling how much stuff is going on. Somebody else have something?
I have a few more things to throw
Go
out. Just, I know it cannot be used for compliance purposes or anything like that. And I understand how the rule works and where we sample and how we sample, but just in theory, and if you think about it, Station 6 basically flows from the furthest point past Station 3. So if Station 6 and Station 3 are both on at the same time and the water's flowing by, it's essentially blended before it gets to any customers, because Station 3 is the higher station, which wouldn't flow without Station 6. If it was the other way around and Station 6 was flowing before and meeting with Station 3 after the fact, there'd be a small section that's exposed to unblended water. But if you're running both stations at the same time, it's essentially blended without the opportunity to sample the blended water. And I know it can't be used for permitting purposes or regulatory compliance, but just something for people to think about in their concerns of the levels. So that would be, something that you could think about. Another point is the bottled water. People need to understand that if they're concerned to the level that they really want bottled water, I recommend you go out and buy bottled water. For the water department to provide bottled water, just so people understand how that works, we could buy and provide bottled water. We would have manpower here. We'd be paying labor, everything else to go pick up the bottled water or have it delivered. And that's it. The water department's not a business in a sense that we're generating profit. All the money that's generated through the water is put into the water system. That any money that we spend in labor and purchasing the water is just going to be reflected in your water bill. So essentially you're paying for it yourself anyway. If people are abusing it, then everybody else is basically paying for them to use that water in that way. Let's see what else I have. Permitting portion of it, like I said, it has to go through permitting, town meeting. There's also bidding processes that we have to be in compliance with. Once it's designed, it has to go out to bid. So it's not something that can actually be done overnight. Like a lot of Facebook comments may have led people to believe or.
Okay, you're breaking out. You're cutting in and out, Bob.
Okay, so I guess the last thing I would say is I'd encourage people to go to town meeting and vote when these articles come up, because that would certainly hold up the process if we did not vote to fund these projects.
Thank you, Bob. Does anybody else have anything?
Mr. Chairman, let's not water down our message to coin a phrase and put an amen to it. What do you think?
Okay, well, that's fine with me. I just want to be sure that if anybody has any questions, that they can that they get voiced here, or if anything that could be answer a potential public question. Mary Jude, I guess if I understood correctly, if we get more questions, then if they're not, we can't answer them ourselves. We can ask for clarification from DEP.
Sure. And not to sound like a broken record, but I do commend people to the website. It's like I said, Mariel and I have been living this for almost 2 years, and the central region unfortunately has a lot of the systems in the state that have PFAS over the standard. So a lot of what we've been hearing from our communities in meetings like this is what has ended up in those FAQ documents. So hopefully a lot of the answers are already out there for people. If there's something that's very specific as to the science, and I'll absolutely send that in to me, and I won't be able to answer it, but I will get you the answer from the people who know all that stuff.
Okay. So, it's to wrap this all up then, we want to encourage folks to stay tuned, to ask questions if they have them. Please ask them to us. Please don't, use the social media bludgeon to get answers, because it makes it very difficult for everyone concerned. Ask the questions. We will either give you the answers or we will get them for you. With that being said, I guess we've had comment from everybody, all of our members. We had nothing else on the agenda, correct, Jen?
That is correct. That's correct.
correct.
That was the only item.
Okay, our next public meeting is on February 1st, Wednesday at 6:30, and it will be via Zoom and YouTube. So
Scott, it's February 3rd.
February 3rd, I'm sorry.
Yep.
It'll be February 3rd and then March 3rd. We have a full agenda already for that. But please, if you have questions, ask them of us, and we will get them of our board. Our office 508-949-8007. And that is where the question should be directed. And we will get you your answers and get any information that we can help you with. With that being said, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
You need a,
Bob Sullivan,
That has to
aye.
be roll call. That has to be roll call.
Tom Funya, aye.
Bob Sullivan, aye.
Baseball,
aye.
Okay, and Scott Sikowski, aye. Okay, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Dee.
Thank you, everybody.